Hey everybody, I am making this video to verbally explain and describe the content of the Claim of Value PowerPoint. So you can click on this PowerPoint link and it will show you this slideshow. Okay, so here we are, Claim of Value. Okay, so claims of value are uh, expressing your judgment about something, like whether you approve or disapprove of something. They attempt to prove that some action, belief, or condition is like right or wrong, good or bad, beautiful or ugly, moral or immoral, fair or unfair, just or unjust, ethical, unethical, worthwhile, undesirable, etc. Those are just some words that you can use to describe the value of your topic. So, think about this, right? Is the issue, the problem that you're discussing, are you focusing on something that is wrong with it? Are you focusing on something that is right? What do you think about the problem? And how are we going to, like, what criteria are you going to use that is going to describe and prove that it is right or wrong? Okay, so some of the questions that are going to be answered by your claim of value is, first of all, simply, is it good or bad? Okay, how bad is it? How good is it? Like on a scale, right? Is it like the worst? Is it the best? Um, of what worth is it, right? Should we value this, and why? Is this issue immoral, or is it moral? Is it right or wrong? And who thinks so? Is it you? Is it specific groups of people? Uh, Certain citizens, a specific country, etc.? And what do those people value? What are their values? So what values or criteria are you going to use to determine that it is good or bad? And you also need to think about, are your values different from other people's values? Like the people who are your expert audience who are going to be reading your paper in theory. Do you share the same values, or are you trying to convince them that your value is more right than what currently exists? Okay, so in this paper, you are making a judgment about your topic or issue, and you are relying upon both factual evidence, like the specific types of evidence that you find in your research, and you are also appealing to the needs and values of your audiences. So, the expert audience that you're writing to, who has the potential to do something about this issue, and also the subject audience that you are discussing, who is the subject of this issue. So we're going to go into that a little bit more about the needs and values of these audiences. But ultimately, right, this is your personal opinion about this topic, about its value. And you need to include this in your thesis, but you should not use the first person. This paper should be written in the third person. As always, though, you can write a personal example or your personal anecdote, for example, in the introduction or as a supporting point of one of your paragraphs. And it's okay to use the first person in those limited circumstances. But overall, this essay should be written in the third person, even when you're making this judgment about the topic. Okay, so expert and subject audiences. So, Claims of value are more demanding than claims of fact because they involve this intense audience analysis. You really have to think about who your subject audience is, who you are writing about, and what are their needs, and also your expert audience. Who are they and what are their needs and values? So, again, who are you writing about? This is the subject audience. And to whom is this argument directed? Who are you writing to? That is the expert audience. So, while factual evidence remains important in this essay, you must explicitly express an attitude or judgment towards the facts that the expert audience will accept, right? That these people who can do something about this issue, they're going to accept what you're saying. You are also writing about a subject audience, so you need to know and explicitly argue for this subject audience's values or needs. You are trying to persuade these experts in this field of study to accept your claim. So although you are not doing it as explicitly as you are with your subject audience, you do need to know the needs and values of your expert audience so that you can appeal to them. So for example, let's say that you have a claim of value that says, letter grades are potentially destructive to a child's education. You could even make that a little bit stronger and say letter grades are destructive to a child's education. As a writer, you must be aware of both the needs and values of the subject audience. So in this case, it would be students. That is who we're talking about, or children specifically. That's who we're writing about. That's who this issue concerns. But we also need to be aware of the needs and values of the expert audience. So in this case, it might be school administrators or teachers or people who work in the school district. Could even be a larger appeal to like the State Board of Education or something like that. Some group of people who are responsible for giving the grades or have the authority to change the grading system. So think about, for your particular topic and just any topic in general, why is the knowledge of both of these audiences important? And how will this knowledge, how will your understanding and awareness of the needs and values of these two groups, how is that going to play out in your paper? Okay, so successful claims of value are grounded in successful claims of fact. So for this paper, your claim needs to include both a claim of value and a claim of fact. So in that previous example, it was only a claim of value. Letter grades are destructive to a child's education. That word destructive is suggesting the value, right? That I believe my judgment of letter grades is that they are destructive, not good. So if I'm attempting to prove that letter grades are destructive to a child's education, I first need to establish a credible claim of fact to use as foundation for this paper. So for example, my claim of fact could be that letter grades ineffectively measure a child's ability. Okay, so that I could prove with specific facts, examples, etc. So now I need to combine the claim of fact and the claim of value for the thesis statement. So because letter grades ineffectively measure a child's ability, that's the claim of fact, they are potentially destructive to a child's education, and that's the claim of value. So side note here, if you're struggling with wording your thesis, this format is a straightforward and effective way to word the claim of value thesis. If you start with because this claim of fact, then the claim of value. Okay, here are a few more examples of claims of value, which include both the claim of fact and the claim of value. So you'll see here that the claim of fact is in yellow for each one, and the claim of value is in blue. You need to be careful in choosing the diction or the words of your value claim. You want to avoid simplistic generic terms like good or bad and argue more specific terms like just or unjust, humane, immoral, unethical. So really use your thesaurus, use those resources that you have to figure out what word is really going to best suit your topic and sound professional and academic. So take a few minutes to go through each one of these and see how they're worded and see how the claim of fact is the fact and the claim of value is the value. Let's take a look here at this last one. It says, the abuse of prescription antibiotics by physicians has caused antibiotics to perform at an ineffective level inside the human body. Okay, so in this case, let's think about who's the subject audience. Who are we writing about? Okay, we can be writing about humans who need antibiotics, right? What are their needs? They need antibiotics to work so that they can become better if they are sick, right? We don't want antibiotics not to work because that's going to put someone at risk of more serious disease or even death. Okay, so this is like a basic physiological need, right? That we need to be healthy. And if antibiotics don't work, then we can't be healthy. The expert audience here would be the physicians. These are the people who have the authority to change their way of prescribing antibiotics, right? Because here I'm claiming that there is an abuse. So that word is signifying the value, right? That something is wrong with the way that they are prescribing antibiotics. So I need to kind of dig into what the needs of that audience are. Like, why are they overprescribing antibiotics? Is there maybe some higher authority that is determining this prescribing or suggesting this prescribing to them? Maybe they don't have alternatives. So I need to kind of think about what are the current needs and values of the physicians and how am I going to get them to change their outlook in order to meet the needs of the subject audience. Okay, moving on. Back to Maslow's hierarchy, which we discussed very briefly in class. So, Maslow's hierarchy is over here on the right-hand side. And as I just mentioned in the previous example, we need to identify the needs of the subject audience. And we need to think about various factors. Depending on your topic, those are going to be different, what you need to be concerned about for these needs. In the previous example, I mentioned physiological need, right? The need to be healthy. So as you can see, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is arranged from the most basic and urgent needs, physiological needs at the bottom, and then it goes up to more psychological needs and needs that are related to our productiveness as members of society. At the very top, these are right, achieving your full potential and creative activities, the need for creativity, art, beauty, etc. So in that previous example, of abuse of prescription antibiotics by physicians, which has caused antibiotics to perform at ineffective levels inside the human body. I'm talking about basic physiological needs, the need for health, the need for security and safety. So maybe even medicine could go down here. Medicine and overall physical.